This is a rare Ethiopian Orthodox Bible manuscript.
You think you know how Jesus' last week unfolded. But the Ethiopian Bible tells it in a way few people have ever seen. The Ethiopian Bible is one of the oldest Christian texts still preserved today.
The Ethiopian Bible is the oldest Bible. The oldest copy of the Ethiopian Bible is 14th century.
Its version of Jesus' final days feels different, emotional, and deeply human without changing the story you already know. In this video, we'll explore what makes it unique, why rumors spread online, and why it matters even today. Curious to learn more about ancient texts and hidden traditions? Hit follow and join us as we uncover stories that history almost forgot. Why the Ethiopian Bible sparks so much curiosity. The Ethiopian Bible holds a special place in Christian history. It belongs to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian communities still practicing today. Christianity reached Ethiopia in the 4th century, long before many European nations officially adopted the faith. Because of this early start, Ethiopian Christians preserved texts, traditions, and practices that developed alongside early Christianity, rather than centuries later. Online discussions often describe the Ethiopian Bible as mysterious or secretive. This reputation grows from the fact that its canon includes more books than the Protestant or Catholic Bibles most people know. The Ethiopian canon contains writings such as Enoch, Jubilees, and other ancient texts that disappeared from Western church use over time. The unfamiliar nature of these books creates excitement and sometimes suspicion. Many viral videos and posts claim that the Ethiopian Bible reveals hidden truths about Jesus' final days. Some suggest it describes events removed from the New Testament or offers a different ending to the crucifixion story. These claims attract attention because they promise forbidden knowledge and lost history. Curiosity spreads faster than careful reading. Scholars who study Ethiopian Christianity approach these claims cautiously. They emphasize that the Ethiopian Bible developed within its own theological tradition, shaped by local language, culture, and long-standing interpretation. Differences exist in emphasis and storytelling style, but not in the core events of Jesus' life and death. Understanding why this curiosity exists helps frame the conversation. The Ethiopian Bible feels ancient, distant, and untouched by Western influence. That feeling alone makes people wonder whether it holds something radically different. The truth, however, turns out to be more grounded and more revealing, in subtle ways. What people think the Ethiopian Bible says about Jesus' final days. A common rumor claims that the Ethiopian Bible describes Jesus surviving the crucifixion. Another version says it hints that someone else took his place. These ideas circulate widely on social media, often paired with dramatic thumbnails and bold titles. The excitement grows when viewers hear that these stories come from ancient African manuscripts. Another claim suggests that Ethiopian texts record secret conversations Jesus had after his arrest, moments ignored by the New Testament. Some videos describe emotional speeches, hidden journeys, or extended teachings given in private. These stories sound compelling because they promise a deeper emotional connection to Jesus as a historical figure. Some people believe the Ethiopian Bible presents a different timeline for the final days, stretching the events over a longer period. Others say it emphasizes political tension rather than religious conflict. Each version reshapes the familiar story in ways that feel fresh and surprising. The problem arises when speculation is presented as fact. Most of these claims trace back to misunderstandings of non-canonical texts or creative interpretations rather than direct passages describing alternative endings. The Ethiopian Bible does not contain a secret chapter where Jesus walks away from the cross. What people think they will find often comes from modern curiosity rather than ancient writing. The real Ethiopian tradition focuses less on rewriting the ending and more on preserving spiritual meaning through ritual, poetry, and interpretation. The surprise lies in how familiar the story remains, even within a different cultural lens. What the Ethiopian Bible actually is The Ethiopian Bible exists primarily in Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language no longer spoken in daily life but preserved for religious use. Translating these texts requires specialized knowledge, and misunderstandings often occur when partial translations circulate online without context. The canon recognized by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church includes books shared with other Christian traditions and additional writings respected within Ethiopian theology. These books were never hidden. They were read publicly in churches and studied by clergy for centuries. When it comes to the Gospels, the Ethiopian Bible contains versions of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, consistent with early Christian manuscripts. These texts describe Jesus' arrest, trial, crucifixion, death, and resurrection in ways that align closely with the New Testament used elsewhere. The differences appear in commentary, emphasis, and liturgical interpretation rather than narrative replacement. Ethiopian tradition places strong focus on suffering, humility, and divine mystery during the final days of Jesus. These themes shape how the story is remembered, rather than changing what happened. Recognizing what the Ethiopian Bible truly represents helps remove the illusion of secret history. It offers continuity rather than contradiction, depth rather than shock. The fascination comes from its age and perspective, not from rewriting events. How the final days of Jesus are described in Ethiopian tradition. Ethiopian Christians remember the final days of Jesus with extraordinary reverence. Holy Week, or Fasika, is not just a commemoration of events, but a lived experience of devotion. Monks, priests, and believers participate in long periods of fasting, prayer, and reflection, creating a spiritual atmosphere that is solemn yet deeply intimate. Unlike the fast-paced narratives found in some modern depictions, the Ethiopian tradition emphasizes feeling each moment of suffering and triumph. This approach makes the story of Jesus' last week feel alive, personal, and emotionally resonant. The night in Gethsemane is portrayed as a quiet, sorrowful moment. Ethiopian tradition focuses on the emotional weight of the scene, highlighting Jesus' loneliness as his disciples struggle to stay awake or hide in fear. Instead of chaotic violence, the arrest is depicted as a heartbreaking tension between loyalty, fear, and betrayal. This subtlety allows believers to connect with the human side of Jesus, seeing him not just as a figure of divine authority, but also as someone confronting fear and sorrow with courage. During his trials, Ethiopian sermons emphasize Jesus' dignity and composure. Pilate, the Jewish leaders, and the crowd appear as instruments of injustice, yet Jesus is always portrayed as patient and aware of the greater purpose unfolding. Unlike popular Western dramatizations that may focus on loud confrontations, Ethiopian tradition dwells on the inner strength and unwavering calm of Jesus. These teachings are reflected in hymns, chants, and liturgical readings, all designed to remind followers of the spiritual significance of endurance and obedience. The crucifixion itself is central to Ethiopian liturgy and art. Pain is depicted honestly, but sensationalism is absent. Monks and artists focus on the spiritual meaning of suffering and sacrifice, illustrating Jesus' journey as a path of ultimate devotion. Crosses, icons, and illustrated manuscripts often portray his serene manner, emphasizing the triumph of faith over despair. These images serve as teaching tools, inviting contemplation rather than shock, and allow the faithful to meditate on the gravity of his sacrifice. Resurrection is celebrated not only as a historical event, but as the culmination of hope, forgiveness, and divine purpose. Ethiopian traditions highlight Jesus' victory over death as a spiritual triumph that restores humanity's relationship with God. Liturgical ceremonies, especially at dawn on Fasika, dramatize this transformation with color, ritual, and community engagement. The focus on emotional depth rather than narrative surprise, reinforces a long-standing continuity of faith. The Ethiopian approach teaches followers that the final days of Jesus are not merely historical events to memorize, but moments to experience emotionally. Each prayer, hymn, and ritual reading invites believers to step into the story, to understand the stakes, and to see themselves reflected in the human struggles Jesus faced. This creates a deeply personal connection to the story, which feels different from Western interpretations, yet ultimately aligns with the same foundational truths of Christianity. The role of non-canonical texts in confusion. Many of the rumors surrounding the Ethiopian Bible stem from non-canonical texts associated with Ethiopia. Writings like the Book of Enoch or the Book of Jubilees explore angels, visions, and cosmic events, but they rarely address Jesus' final days directly. Their dramatic language and vivid imagery, however, can be misinterpreted as alternative histories. People unfamiliar with the context may assume these texts are hidden gospels, when in fact they serve a different spiritual and moral purpose. Other apocryphal texts preserved in Ethiopia, such as the Book of Adam and Eve, explore the human struggle with sin, repentance, and divine guidance. While these texts enrich the theological landscape of Ethiopian Christianity, they do not replace the canonical Gospels. Misunderstandings occur when excerpts are removed from their original context and circulated online, creating a distorted picture of what the Ethiopian Bible says about Jesus' final week. Dramatic imagery within these texts fuels speculation. Descriptions of angels descending, visions of heavenly judgment, or cosmic disturbances can be mistakenly interpreted as secret accounts of the crucifixion or hidden escapes. The texts are symbolic, teaching lessons about morality and faith, rather than documenting alternative endings to historical events. Their inclusion in Ethiopian tradition highlights the culture's emphasis on spiritual imagination and reflection. Scholars emphasize that these non-canonical works were never intended to challenge the core story of Jesus' life or death. Instead, they expand moral and theological discussions within early Christian communities. Misinterpretation arises when modern audiences, searching for novelty or hidden secrets, project sensational narratives onto these ancient writings. The allure of mystery often outweighs careful study. Despite this, these texts play a critical role in Ethiopian religious life. They inform hymns, liturgy, and theological reflection, giving believers tools to understand human struggle, divine justice, and cosmic order. By emphasizing ethics, obedience, and spiritual reflection, they complement rather than contradict the canonical story. Their poetic and symbolic language invites readers to think deeply rather than seek scandal. Ultimately, understanding the role of non-canonical texts allows us to separate myth from tradition. These writings illuminate Ethiopian Christianity's rich cultural and spiritual heritage without altering historical events. Recognizing their purpose helps viewers appreciate the depth and nuance of the tradition, instead of falling for sensational claims. Why the Ethiopian story feels different without being different. The Ethiopian Bible feels unique because it exists within a different cultural and historical framework. Language, poetic style, and ritual practices all shape how the story of Jesus' final days is remembered. Ge'ez, the sacred language, conveys subtle emotional undertones that are often lost in translation. This gives the narrative a distinct rhythm, tone, and depth that can feel unfamiliar to modern audiences. Poetry plays a significant role in shaping the Ethiopian narrative. Hymns and chants are central to worship, emphasizing the emotions of sorrow, endurance, and divine love rather than chronological detail. As a result, scenes like the arrest, trial, and crucifixion are experienced more through mood and reflection than through dramatic action. This creates the perception of a different story, even though the events themselves remain consistent with the canonical Gospels. Art and manuscript illustrations contribute to the perception of difference as well. Ethiopian icons often depict Jesus with elongated features, serene expressions, and symbolic colors. The scenes highlight spiritual significance rather than literal realism. This aesthetic influences how believers and viewers imagine the final days, emphasizing dignity, contemplation, and emotional resonance over spectacle. The focus on ritual also shapes the story's impact. Ethiopian Holy Week involves extended periods of fasting, prayer, and meditation, giving believers time to internalize and emotionally process each event. Unlike quick narrative summaries, this lived experience reinforces a spiritual interpretation that feels unique. Even small differences in ritual emphasis, like the solemnity of certain prayers, can make familiar stories appear more profound or mysterious. Another factor is interpretation by clergy. Ethiopian priests and monks often highlight themes of endurance, patience, and spiritual obedience. They interpret the same events through lenses shaped by centuries of theological reflection. As a result, sermons and liturgical readings can give a different emotional emphasis without changing historical facts. In short, the Ethiopian story feels different because the tradition emphasizes reflection, emotional depth, and spiritual symbolism. The story's events remain the same, but the way believers engage with them creates a distinct experience. This difference explains why some viewers feel they are encountering an alternative account, when, in reality, they are witnessing a culturally and spiritually rich interpretation. Did any Ethiopian text question the crucifixion? Despite rumors circulating online, no Ethiopian canonical text questions the crucifixion. Academic studies, translations, and church records consistently affirm alignment with the broader Christian tradition. The arrest, trial, suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus are central to Ethiopian theology, forming the foundation of religious teaching and ritual practice. Any claim to the contrary usually comes from misattributed quotations or modern reinterpretations rather than historical evidence. Some non-canonical writings from outside Ethiopia do speculate about Jesus' fate or survival, but these works never became part of Ethiopian religious teaching. Scholars who specialize in Ethiopian studies repeatedly confirm that the Ethiopian canon is consistent with early Christian texts in these key areas. Any deviation is symbolic or theological rather than historical. The Ethiopian Church emphasizes the crucifixion as both a historical event and a spiritual lesson. Sermons, icons, and hymns continually reinforce the sacrifice's importance, highlighting humility, obedience, and divine purpose. Even when narrative details differ slightly, the theological significance remains intact, leaving no room for alternative endings in official doctrine. It's also worth noting that Ethiopian texts highlight aspects of Jesus' suffering that other traditions sometimes overlook. The emotional, spiritual, and moral dimensions are expanded, but they never replace or contradict the events themselves. This creates a richer experience rather than a conflicting account. Rumors about denial or replacement of the crucifixion often stem from social media interpretations, cherry-picked excerpts, or apocryphal texts misrepresented as canonical. These stories grow because the Ethiopian canon is unfamiliar to most audiences, but they lack historical and textual support. Understanding this reality clarifies why the Ethiopian perspective is fascinating without being radical. The canon preserves the story, but in a voice that invites reflection, contemplation, and deep emotional connection, challenging viewers to engage thoughtfully rather than expect sensational surprises. How social media turned tradition into clickbait. Social media thrives on mystery and surprise. Videos about the Ethiopian Bible often promise shocking revelations about Jesus' final days, using titles like The Secret Gospel of Ethiopia or What They Don't Want You to Know About Jesus. These videos exaggerate differences in translation, interpretation, or symbolism to capture attention, even when the underlying story remains consistent with the New Testament. The short video format encourages simplification and sensationalism. Complex theological texts are condensed into 60-second clips, removing nuance and emphasizing drama. Non-canonical references or symbolic imagery are often presented as historical fact, creating confusion for viewers who lack background knowledge. Misleading or exaggerated titles generate engagement, but do not reflect academic scholarship. Many viewers assume that any unusual depiction or artistic interpretation counts as hidden truth, when in reality, the Ethiopian Bible simply presents familiar events in a different style. This distortion fuels rumors about survival, replacements, or alternative endings. Even sincere attempts at storytelling can contribute to misunderstanding. Content creators may want to share fascinating traditions, but overstate novelty to compete for views. Small errors in translation or contextualization spread rapidly, reinforcing myths about hidden histories or secret gospels. At the same time, social media has a positive side. It sparks curiosity about Ethiopian Christianity. Viewers who follow up with credible sources, scholarly articles, or translations gain a deeper appreciation for the faith's history, language, and cultural richness. This demonstrates that responsible exploration can counter sensationalism. Ultimately, social media has turned Ethiopian tradition into clickbait because mystery and unfamiliarity are irresistible to online audiences. Understanding this dynamic allows viewers to separate hype from substance, appreciating the depth and beauty of the Ethiopian Bible without falling for false claims. Asking questions without making false claims. Curiosity about the Ethiopian Bible often comes from a desire to uncover hidden truths or secret stories. While speculation is natural, it's important to frame questions responsibly. Asking how different communities remember Jesus' final days, or why certain details are emphasized, can spark meaningful exploration without presenting unverified claims as fact. This approach allows viewers to learn while respecting the integrity of ancient texts. Speculation can be fun when it's grounded in context. For example, wondering why Ethiopian texts emphasize Jesus' emotional suffering more than political tension does not imply hidden conspiracies. It reflects cultural priorities and spiritual storytelling. Engaging with these questions encourages viewers to think critically about how history, theology, and culture interact. One way to explore responsibly is by comparing sources. Scholars, translations, and church traditions provide context that can answer some questions or reveal nuances that viral videos ignore. For instance, analyzing the Ethiopian canonical Gospels alongside apocryphal texts shows why some details appear in one tradition but not another. This method preserves curiosity without misleading audiences. Questions about symbolism, ritual, or emotional emphasis can open rich discussions. For instance, why does Ethiopian art show Jesus serene on the cross, while Western art often portrays him in dramatic agony? Such questions are speculative, yet grounded in observable differences, inviting reflection rather than assumption. It is also important to acknowledge what cannot be known. Ancient texts often leave gaps, and some meanings may have been clear to the original audience but are opaque today. Recognizing these uncertainties fosters humility and prevents the spread of false conclusions. Speculation becomes a tool for engagement rather than misinformation. Finally, encouraging viewers to ask questions responsibly cultivates curiosity while maintaining credibility. Wondering about alternative interpretations, emotional dimensions, or cultural perspectives is both fun and educational. It transforms engagement with the Ethiopian Bible from passive consumption into active discovery, showing that curiosity and respect for truth can coexist. What scholars actually say. Academic research consistently confirms that the Ethiopian Bible aligns with early Christian teachings. Scholars specializing in Ethiopian Christianity emphasize that while the canon contains additional texts, the core narrative of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection remains consistent with the New Testament. Differences in presentation and emphasis are cultural rather than doctrinal, reflecting centuries of interpretation rather than secret histories. Translation plays a crucial role in perception. The Ethiopian Bible is primarily in Ge'ez, a language with unique idioms and stylistic conventions. Literal translations may sound different or mysterious to modern audiences, leading to misinterpretation. Scholars stress that understanding the language and literary style is essential for accurate comprehension. Researchers also highlight the importance of ritual and oral tradition. Many events are interpreted through liturgy, hymnody, and preaching, which shapes how stories are experienced emotionally. This emphasis explains why Ethiopian retellings can feel distinct without altering historical events. Emotional depth often overshadows chronological detail, creating a sense of novelty where none exists. Academic sources often point out the value of non-canonical texts for understanding culture, theology, and moral instruction. Books like Enoch or Jubilees are studied not as secret histories, but as windows into ancient religious imagination. They enrich understanding without contradicting the story of Jesus' crucifixion or resurrection. Modern media sometimes misrepresent scholarly conclusions, presenting speculation or partial interpretations as verified findings. Researchers caution against such oversimplifications and encourage consulting peer-reviewed publications, translations by reputable academics, and church documentation. This approach ensures viewers receive both depth and accuracy. Finally, scholars celebrate the Ethiopian tradition as a living connection to early Christianity. Far from being exotic curiosities, these texts demonstrate how faith, culture, and devotion interact over centuries. They encourage careful engagement rather than sensationalism, showing that understanding context is more meaningful than chasing mysteries. Why Ethiopia preserved these texts so well? Ethiopia's geographic isolation played a key role in preserving its ancient Christian texts. Mountainous landscapes and remote monasteries limited foreign invasions, disruptions, and cultural dilution. Unlike other regions where manuscripts were lost or destroyed, Ethiopian communities maintained a continuous religious tradition that protected the integrity of their texts. Monastic dedication was another critical factor. Ethiopian monks spent years copying manuscripts by hand, carefully reproducing every detail. Each copy was treated as a sacred object, not merely a historical record. The labor-intensive process required precision and reverence, ensuring the survival of texts over centuries. Faith-driven motivation underpinned preservation efforts. For Ethiopian Christians, these manuscripts were more than books. They were embodiments of divine instruction and spiritual guidance. Communities invested significant resources in maintaining them, from constructing libraries to training scribes, reflecting the text's sacred status. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church established formal practices for manuscript maintenance. Texts were stored in specialized church libraries, often wrapped in cloth and kept in protective cases. Ritual reading, study, and communal worship reinforced their significance, making the manuscripts central to both spiritual life and cultural identity. Cultural continuity also strengthened preservation. Language, liturgy, and educational systems focused on maintaining Ge'ez and the associated texts. Each generation of clergy and scholars was trained to read, interpret, and safeguard manuscripts, creating an unbroken chain of stewardship that is rare in religious history. These preservation efforts made Ethiopia a unique repository of ancient Christian knowledge. The survival of these texts offers modern audiences insights into early Christian thought, liturgical practice, and artistic expression. Their endurance is not a mystery, it is the result of centuries of devotion, discipline, and careful cultural transmission. What we can learn from Ethiopian perspectives. The Ethiopian perspective on Jesus' final days highlights themes often overlooked in Western narratives. Endurance, humility, and patient suffering dominate the emotional landscape. By focusing on these aspects, Ethiopian tradition encourages followers to consider spiritual resilience as much as historical events. This approach emphasizes living faith over mere knowledge. Reflection and meditation are central to Ethiopian practice. Instead of quickly recounting events, believers are invited to immerse themselves in each moment. The sorrow of Gethsemane, the weight of the cross, and the quiet triumph of resurrection. This deliberate engagement creates emotional depth, fostering personal connection to Jesus' experience. Art, music, and ritual serve as educational tools. Hymns, chants, and illuminated manuscripts communicate moral lessons and spiritual truths. They reinforce themes of compassion, obedience, and hope. By experiencing these artistic expressions, believers internalize lessons beyond textual comprehension, highlighting a holistic approach to learning. Ethiopian tradition also teaches the value of communal memory. Storytelling, liturgy, and worship are shared experiences that bind the community. Understanding Jesus' final days is not just intellectual, it is collective, emotional, and participatory. This perspective underscores the social dimension of faith, showing how memory and interpretation shape culture. The emphasis on human emotions and divine purpose encourages nuanced thinking. Followers are invited to grapple with suffering, justice, and forgiveness. These lessons transcend historical detail, offering guidance relevant to everyday life. Ethiopian texts prioritize moral and spiritual insight over sensational revelation. The Ethiopian perspective challenges modern audiences to slow down and reflect. It reminds viewers that depth, context, and emotional resonance can be as meaningful as dramatic surprises. The story of Jesus' final days becomes not just history to be known, but an experience to be felt, offering timeless lessons on faith, empathy, and devotion. Rumors, faith, and human imagination. Human imagination thrives on mystery. When ancient texts like the Ethiopian Bible emerge online, curiosity transforms into speculation. Social media amplifies this process, creating rumors that spread faster than careful study. People are naturally drawn to the idea of hidden truths or secret knowledge, especially regarding a figure as central as Jesus. Faith itself invites interpretation. Communities have always explored symbolic meanings in Scripture, reflecting on divine lessons, moral guidance, or human struggle. Ethiopian tradition emphasizes contemplation and reflection, which can appear mysterious to outsiders unfamiliar with its style. Misunderstanding arises when symbolic expression is read literally. Rumors often blend partial truths with imagination. For example, non-canonical texts discuss angels or visions, but some viewers assume they describe secret events in Jesus' life. This combination of unfamiliar material and creative speculation produces viral claims, even when no historical or textual evidence supports them. Despite this, speculation can be harmless or even positive when framed responsibly. Asking, "What does this mean?" or "Why does this text emphasize suffering?" invites curiosity without asserting false conclusions. Thoughtful speculation can stimulate learning, prompting viewers to consult credible sources and explore cultural context. Faith and imagination interact in ways that reveal the human desire to understand the divine. Rumors highlight how incomplete knowledge and emotional engagement shape perception. They show that storytelling is not only about facts, but also about meaning, emotion, and cultural transmission. Ultimately, understanding the role of rumors helps audiences navigate content responsibly. Curiosity is natural, and imagination enriches experience. But separating evidence from speculation ensures that engagement remains respectful, insightful, and faithful to the texts themselves. This approach honors both history and human creativity. Final reflection. The Ethiopian Bible does not change or rewrite the events of Jesus' final days. It preserves them faithfully while presenting them in a voice that feels entirely unique. Centuries of Ethiopian history, culture, and religious devotion have shaped the way the story is told, coloring each scene with subtle emotional tones and spiritual reflection that differ from Western interpretations. From the quiet sorrow of Gethsemane to the solemn dignity of the crucifixion, every moment is imbued with a sense of intimacy and contemplation, inviting readers to experience the events rather than simply observe them. Language plays a key role in this distinctiveness. Written primarily in Ge'ez, an ancient liturgical language, the texts carry nuances, rhythms, and expressions that are difficult to fully capture in translation. Words and phrases that describe Jesus' suffering, patience, and divine purpose resonate with a poetic cadence, making the narrative feel deeply reflective and human. These linguistic choices highlight aspects of the story that might be overlooked in other traditions, emphasizing the emotional and spiritual weight of the events rather than dramatic spectacle. Devotion also shapes the Ethiopian account. Monks, priests, and believers have preserved these texts through centuries of careful copying, liturgical use, and ritual practice. Each reading, hymn, or meditation strengthens the story's spiritual resonance, allowing generations of worshipers to engage with the final days of Jesus in a profoundly personal way. The narrative becomes less about historical facts alone and more about lived experience, shaping understanding through devotion as much as through text. What surprises many people is how familiar the story remains despite these differences. The arrest, trials, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus unfold in ways consistent with the canonical Gospels. There are no secret escapes, no alternate endings. Yet the Ethiopian tradition makes the story feel fresh, contemplative, and emotionally vivid. The familiarity of events combined with the distinct voice creates a sense of discovery, where viewers or readers encounter a story they thought they knew but experience it anew. This unique perspective protects the truth of the narrative while also leaving room for wonder. By presenting the same events through a lens shaped by centuries of history, ritual, and reflection, the Ethiopian Bible encourages thoughtful engagement rather than sensational speculation. Readers are invited to consider not only what happened, but how it felt, how it was interpreted, and how it continues to inspire devotion. The story's emotional depth adds richness without altering its factual foundation. The Ethiopian Bible does not present a hidden ending to Jesus' final days. It tells the same story: his arrest, trial, crucifixion, and resurrection, through a voice shaped by centuries of devotion and tradition. Its language, imagery, and rituals give the familiar events emotional depth and intimacy, inviting believers to reflect on patience, endurance, and spiritual meaning. Through careful preservation and ritual, the narrative resonates across generations, offering both continuity and a renewed sense of wonder. Do you think ancient traditions should be explored more carefully? Or do mysteries make them more exciting? Share your thoughts in the comments.